This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Matt Addison with Paul Gorst, Kay and David Lynch alongside me. We'll be previewing the Merseyside derby very shortly, and of course we'll take a quick look back at the excellent victory over RB Leipzig in Budapest as well. We'll pick our teams for tomorrow's games as well at the end of the show and make our score predictions, but plenty to go over before then. Before we get on to the main event, of course, Liverpool versus Everton. Gorsty, let's start with Tuesday night's game in the Champions League. The Champions League is back, and seemingly so are Liverpool.
Maybe. I think Liverpool were able to get the result they did because it's a game that they don't really play in much, if that makes sense. It was a team who backed themselves to go up head-to-head against Liverpool, and were happy to kind of commit men forward, with the likes of Angelino, who's one of RB Leipzig's better players, but he's a left-back, and on the amount of times he was trying to get into the box, into the penalty area, and add to what has been a bit of an impressive goal tally this season. That played into Liverpool's hands, I think. And I think if you look at Liverpool's games over the last few months, starting with that West Brom game on the 27th of December, teams have been able to work out Liverpool by sticking 10 and 11 men behind the ball, staying in the game, working hard and waiting for chances to inevitably open up. And this was a completely different game. Liverpool were content to kind of play on the counter-attack for the first 20, 25 minutes and then punish Leipzig in the second half with a couple of mistakes quite ruthlessly, really. We haven't been able to say that much of Liverpool of late. We've seen, gilt-edged chances come and go. But it was a very good result. A little bit unfair to Leipzig that they had to play the home leg in a stadium that I'm not sure that they've ever played in. Certainly Liverpool hadn't. So it's... that was just the way that the cookie crumbles. I suppose Liverpool won't be moaning too much about that. They'll just take the 2-0 win and 1 foot in the quarterfinals.
How important is it, Dan, that Liverpool do go quite a long way in this competition this season? We know what's happened in the Premier League. As Gorsty says, this was a different type of match and almost a bit of an opportunity to stop thinking about the Premier League for a second and just have a little bit of a go at Leipzig.
Yeah, I think it's really important that Liverpool have something else to focus on, apart from the what's now looking like a flawed or what will be an unsuccessful defence of the Premier League title. Obviously, we know that was always the ambition from the start. Roy Keane's comments the other week when he was going, I never heard anyone from Liverpool saying they wanted to retain it. Everyone was saying it. Virtually every single player, as soon as they won the league, and the manager was saying that. But obviously, he's got his own axe to grind there, and good luck to him. I was struck watching the game, particularly, but Mo Salah, I think possibly the day before, or maybe the Monday, had put a tweet out on his social media, basically, a kind of rallying cry and saying, we do not want this season to be defined by what's happened in recent weeks. And it was very much a performance of a team that knew that they had an opportunity here to give some longevity, some hope, some belief back into the season. And, as we've seen in the last couple of months when Liverpool have been on this kind of glass mountain where, one bad thing turns into another, momentum can very much shift the other way. Success breeds success. And, as Gorsty said, they've got 1 foot in the quarterfinals now. Obviously, it remains to be seen where that second leg will be played. And, as we're all very much aware that pandemic football has kind of reduced home advantage. So, Liverpool can't take anything for granted. But if Liverpool can get themselves into, knockout football in April, I think it's inevitable. There will hopefully be some knock-on positive effects in the Premier League form as well. Because people had their hearts set on Liverpool retaining the league so that we could have a parade to celebrate last year's title. Now, I think we'd have been glad if Liverpool won the League Cup this year, just to have any excuse for a jolly around the city. But if they could go far in the Champions League and ideally win it, obviously that would get the opportunity to have that kind of double whammy. But as much as anything else, I just think it brings a bit of hope and a bit of belief, because they've just looked like there's been an awful lot of tired legs and tired minds at Anfield recently. And winning, it's one of the old axioms of football, winning makes you less tired.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mohamed Salah coming up there in what Dan's saying, David. I mean, I did the maths on this the other day, and if Liverpool were to get to the Champions League final and he was to play in all of their remaining matches, to continue scoring at the rate he is this season, he'd end up with 38, which would, of course, be not far short of what he got, the 44 in his first season. I mean, for him to be doing that and dragging this team forward, as Dan says there, is that extra impressive given the sort of struggles that Liverpool have had, that Mohamed Salah has still essentially just continued his world-class ability and world-class abilities in front of goal in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of came with it as a bit of a surprise, I suppose, when he sort of surpassed last season's total by scoring there in Leipzig, because you didn't feel like last season he had a particularly poor year or anything like that. He was a major part of that title success, and he also went deepish in the Champions League as well. It's it was a bit of a surprise really, but it just shows out how influential he's been this season, and the fact that he is dragging the team along at times. They're not the creative force, so they haven't been in recent weeks and months. They haven't been the creative force they were, and so for him to still be getting all these goals just shows just what a high quality player is. What I quite liked about his performance as well in Leipzig, and Klopp touched on this in his press conference, was that he seemed to spend half the game at right back helping out Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. And the fact that tweet sort of that he doesn't really sort of speak out that often about Liverpool related things, post match pick or stuff like that, but he doesn't really sort of make big statements like he did. But the fact he did and then backed it up with a performance like that was not just scoring a goal but working his nuts off, he was absolutely brilliant, I thought. Just says a lot about him as a character as well as a goal scorer. So it's great to have him in this sort of form as well. And that his form at the moment is something that makes you think it isn't sort of out of the question for Liverpool to go on and win the Champions League this season. I know they've been off colour in the Premier League and haven't been quite themselves, and that's pretty much decided now. I think that City are going to win it, but in the Champions League, with the players they've got, the quality and the mentality and the winning experience they've got throughout the team, if they can just get a little bit of consistency at the back, and then you've got players like Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane up front, then you've got a real chance of winning European silverware as well.
Yeah, Gorst, I mean, Lynch said there about defensive stability being a big thing. I think as well as Mohamed Salah, it was a big performance for Ozan Kabak as well. He didn't have loads and loads to do, but what he did, he seemed to do really well, which off the back of what happened on his debut, I suppose it was a positive sign that he managed to bounce back almost from that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I thought for most of the game he was solid against Leicester as well. I think I could see Klopp's explanation for why that Leicester goal went in, when he said that he's kind of just not used to defending how we defend. Everyone knows that Alisson is the sweeper keeper, and if he can come and get it, then he will. And obviously playing with him every week, the likes of Van Dijk and Gomez will know that. But I thought it was a little bit unfair on him to level any kind of blame for that goal against him. I thought when your keeper's rushing 20, 25 yards from his goal and taking you out, I think you've got to lay the blame at the keeper's door, even if you can make mitigation for the way they like to defend. So I thought he was solid enough against Leicester, up against Jamie Vardy. Vardy had obviously the chance in the first half when he hit the bar, but other than that, for large parts he's kept them quiet. And we all know that Vardy, probably for me, top 10 of all time in the Premier League in terms of centre forwards. And then he was equally solid, if not better, against Leipzig on Tuesday night. He doesn't seem to do anything spectacular. He just gets his blocks in, his headers and his tackles, and when he is in possession, he just kind of plays it out to Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I think most Liverpool supporters would want him on the ball, wouldn't he? So I mean, it's a massive 3 months in the career of him actually, and it's come early on. He's only just turned 20, and he's almost got a 3-month audition now for Liverpool. And if he passes it, then he'll become a Liverpool player on what you would imagine would be a 5-year deal, and then he can learn and grow and develop alongside Van Dijk and Gomez and Joel Matip. And if it's one that doesn't quite go to plan, then he's going to go back to Schalke, who could be facing Bundesliga relegation and are likely to be hosting something of a fire sale given their financial problems. So it's a huge 3 months for him, and tomorrow is one of the biggest games he'll play in.
Yeah, Jurgen Klopp, Dan, was suggesting that he deserves praise, Ozan Kabak, for the way he's come in and performed it in the way that he has done over the first couple of games. And I suppose he's not going to say anything other than that, because he's going to have to rely on this player considerably over the next few months, as Gorsty said. But how impressed have you been? Because I think it is worth emphasising, isn't it, that he is just 20 years old. He's never played for a club like Liverpool, not even a club that plays like Liverpool. I'm sure playing for Schalke is very, very different to playing for Jurgen Klopp's teams.
I've been really impressed with him, particularly obviously on the back of Tuesday night. He was pretty solid on Saturday. I think there was the unfortunate incident with the second goal that I think really you have to put down largely to the goalkeeper. When you've got new players coming in and obviously an unsettled back four, which is what Liverpool have had throughout the season, those kind of things are going to happen. But there's good times and less good times to come into a football club. I always, look back at the summer of 2014 after Liverpool had obviously come so close to winning the league then. And even if the recruitment that summer obviously wasn't ideal, I've always kind of thought, well, I think anyone would have had a job on their hands to come and change things, because just the general mood and feel around the club was obviously pretty despondent. And the way things have gone, obviously, over the last couple of months, well, certainly since just before Christmas, it can't have been an easy situation to come in, for a young lad, foreign country, 20 years old. And I think so far, playing alongside Jordan Henderson, he's done very, very well. He was very assured. He picked up a booking, didn't he, for a slightly rash tackle midway through the second half, which I remember kind of chuckling to myself, because literally about 2 minutes before, he showed real composure and kind of held back when he could have dived in and shepherded someone out. I mean, so you're going to get that with young defenders. He has very much been helped, of course, by playing alongside Jordan Henderson, who, even if he isn't a natural centre half, obviously is such a fantastic leader and has done an incredible job, really, trying to shepherd the back four and the team through this difficult spell. The fact that Liverpool brought Kabak in alongside Ben Davies at the same time at the end of the transfer window, would suggest that maybe they will play as a partnership at some point. And I think that's when we'll really find out what the measure of Kabak is, when he maybe has to take the lead, even if obviously I know Davies is 5 years older than him, but Kabak's is already an international, isn't he? I would very much doubt that would be tomorrow. I think that would be maybe a little bit too much of a leap of faith to throw Davies in for a debut and to have what would it be, the 18th centre-back partnership of the season in a Merseyside derby. But looking at Liverpool's fixtures, there's no easy games, but they've had an awful lot of big games back to back, and Klopp may look at some of the fixtures coming up and what's the point of bringing the two of them in if they're not going to play together, and you can release Fabinho and Henderson back into the midfield, where obviously they've been really missed. So I think that really will be the true kind of measure of whether Kabak's got a future at the club. But so far, I think the initial signs have been overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the main event then, Liverpool versus Everton. I'm sure Ozan Kabak will play a part in that one, but there will not be any Fabinho, Gorsty. But at the same time, Alisson is fit. There had been a little bit of a scare over him. He was missing from the training pictures that we saw yesterday, but it's almost one boost and one blow for the Reds for tomorrow.
It is, but thankfully it's nothing new, is it? I mean, I think we knew before the game that, well, we certainly knew that Fabinho was a doubt, and I was never convinced that he was gonna play. And the Alisson stuff, he just wasn't pictured in training, was he? Which is sometimes a bit of a giveaway, but not always. And Klopp just said that he's fine, and that was all that he had to say in the press conference. So I think Liverpool are going to be lining up with the team that most people expected. Until we find out tomorrow afternoon that there's been an injury to someone new, as seems to be the case with pretty much every game at the moment. So I think Liverpool have got enough to get a result. Obviously, we all know about about the recent record at Anfield and Everton's historic record at Anfield, but I just think Liverpool showed a little bit more of what they're capable of. Looked a little bit more like their old selves on Tuesday night, and hopefully that'll breathe a lot of confidence back into a team who haven't had any of it, have they, for the best part of 2 months. We've seen so many games that have been so evident about that. So, and particularly, as Lynchy says, with Salah in the ranks at the moment, they've got every chance.
The other thing, of course, that'll be missing, Lynch, is fans. It's not just Fabinho that Liverpool are missing, but in a game like this, is it almost as big a miss, do you think, for Liverpool to be without those supporters? Because, we've seen so many times over the years how difficult Everton have found it coming to Anfield.
Yeah, well, I think back to the sort of FA Cup game last season and the influence fans had on that, because Everton had out what was basically a first team and Liverpool was a mixture of youngsters and sort of fringe players, and still Everton just couldn't get over the line. They just couldn't perform like they usually could. They couldn't make it difficult for a team of kids, basically. So it just shows you what influence Anfield as a whole has. And we've seen this season, obviously, looking at Manchester City's result, they finally ended their hoodoo at Anfield. It'd been how many years since they've won there, and they finally got the win. Largely, I imagine, because playing in front of no fans and not having that pressure on you when you give the ball away, or that sudden panic that fans can induce when they get off the seats. That's got to be a massive factor, I think, for Everton. They've got to be going into this thinking, what a huge opportunity this is. I know they're not in particularly fantastic form, but neither are Liverpool, taking the form as the last 10 games or so. So, to go there and face the Liverpool side who was still a little bit uncertain despite getting a decent result last time out, and then knowing that you're not going to have the fans on your back, it's a huge opportunity for them at Anfield. It makes it a lot more difficult for Liverpool.
Yeah, I think Jurgen Klopp earlier, Dan, suggested that nothing would be carried over from the Goodison Park game. Of course, when Virgil van Dijk got injured, there'd be no sort of, putting right the wrongs of that, if you like, from Liverpool's side of things. I mean, do you think that will be the case for the players? I suppose it does make it easier for Liverpool to do that because there'll be no fans. I'm sure fans wouldn't have forgotten, but of course, fans won't be involved tomorrow.
No, I mean, Klopp's got to say something like that, hasn't he? He can't come out before the day before the game and say, "Yeah, we're going to make a set at Pickford and Richarlison because we've still got a chip on our shoulder about what happened in October." As Lynchy said, no supporters is a major deal, particularly for a team like Liverpool. I mean, people, you can talk about it till the cows come home, but there are certain teams and certain players that will respond better to having no crowds, and other teams that will miss it more. And I don't think it's being biased or obtuse or anything. To everything we know about Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool has been based on that intense bond between the players and the fans, and we've seen it for the last 5 or 6 years. So, a blind man can see that has been one of the fundamental things that's been missing, and it has had an effect on Liverpool this season. It's 4 months ago. A lot of water's gone under the bridge. Obviously, we've seen the pictures today of Van Dijk and Gomez back together training in Kirby, and obviously that's given everybody a lovely lift. But the reality is, we're very unlikely to see either of them on the pitch again this season. The bottom line is Liverpool need the 3 points. In Premier League terms, they've been on a dreadful run since just before Christmas, and it's not just Everton they need to worry about. There's they're eighth in the table at the moment, and there's plenty of teams that will be looking at Liverpool and thinking they can potentially finish above them. So I think it's a derby is a derby, whether it's played in front of 55,000 or 5 men in a park, or 5 journalists in the ground, whatever it may be tomorrow. The fans won't be there in the flesh, but everybody on both sides will know that there'll be millions all around the world living and breathing every kick of it. And I'm sure that will be very much a part of Jurgen Klopp's team talk beforehand and the players' mentality. But it's the old cliche, but they've got to make sure they play the game, not the occasion, which might be slightly easier to do because there's no fans there. But it won't be easy. I feel like I've said this before every derby for about the last 10 years. I always have this horrible feeling in my stomach that Everton are due one. They haven't won one this century, and it's going to happen eventually. You'd think at some point, but I really hope it's not tomorrow.
Yeah, the game is always important, Gorst, as Dan says there, that the importance we don't even need to talk about. But is it almost added to this season because both teams are trying to get into those European places? I'm sure quite a lot of Everton fans might fancy the chances this season of all seasons to get into that top 4. Does that add anything to the game, or is this game just so big that it doesn't really need anything adding to it?
Oh no, I think it definitely adds something to it. I've written something in the Blood Red column this week that it's probably the most important derby since the FA Cup final, semi-final rather, which was 9 years ago. So it's huge. And I just think, given the things that have gone wrong for Liverpool this season, I mean, normally Everton fans kind of trot across Stanley Park with the the almost acceptance that it's not going to be their day, and maybe last year's FA Cup game was the one where they thought, okay, this is finally going to be our day. We're going to be playing a team of academy graduates, and we can finally end that miserable run. And I know a lot of fans at the time were hoping that Klopp was going to play a strong team just because of how proud that record is, and rightly so. But I think Everton fans probably, when they lost that game, they probably wouldn't have expected another Anfield derby that would have been as inviting, to come along so quickly. But it's the very next one. And this is probably, well, it's certainly obviously the best chance since that game, but it's probably the best chance in the Premier League for years, given Liverpool's poor run at home, the lack of fans in the ground, the injury crisis, the fact that they're now managed by an elite coach, on a little bit of a sticky pass themselves, but they've still got hopes of finishing in the top four as well. So, this is a really, really big derby, and as I say, it's probably the biggest one since Big Andy Carroll nodded in at Wembley in 2012.
It's almost a big opportunity for Everton, isn't it, Lynchy? I mean, Liverpool haven't won at home now for more than 2 months. They've played 5 games since then, drawn 2 and lost 3. If Everton were ever going to win a derby, surely they've got to be thinking that it's going to be this one.
Yeah, and I think this is, looking at the league table as a whole as well, they're very close. Obviously, the last couple of defeats for Everton mean they can't leapfrog Liverpool with a win unless I think it's about 10-0 or something like that, which I can't see happening either way. But yeah, if they want to finish above Liverpool in the table, they need to be winning this game. Really, they need to be closing that gap. And I don't think, from Everton's perspective, there's not a lot of excuses not to. Everything that possibly could have gone wrong for Liverpool this season seems to have. Not just the injuries, but I'm thinking some of the crazy VAR interventions that have gone against them, and the offsides where it just comes down to sheer a flip of the coin and luck that's gone against Liverpool. So this is a big opportunity for Everton to sort of show that they're serious under Carlo Ancelotti. He's a little while into the job now. He's had long enough to sort of put a team together and know his tactics. And they want to be showing that they can be up there and be a top 4 side under Carlo Ancelotti. And Liverpool and the current guys are not, they're not the top title challenging team that they were in recent years. They're a top 4 outfit themselves. So, it's a big game for them to sort of try and prove a point about where they are in their development. And like we've said, there's not going to be a much better opportunity for them to win a Merseyside derby at Anfield and also to finish above Liverpool than this season. So they really need to take it.
I think they're probably going to come to Anfield, Dan, and sit deep, try and counter-attack Liverpool. And that is something that Liverpool have struggled with of late, particularly at home. Is that a worry at all, or do you see it more the other way of an opportunity, really, for Liverpool to show that actually they are back and they can break down these low blocks?
Yeah, I mean, as was mentioned earlier on, in the podcast, that was, I think, what Gorsty said earlier. That was one of the things that helped Liverpool a bit on Tuesday night, that Leipzig did come out a little bit to play. And there has been really a proven template of how to play against Liverpool in recent times. Sit deep, frustrate, and wait for mistakes to happen. And this is where you've got to hope that Liverpool have done some thinking and have not necessarily reinvented the wheel, but have worked out that the vast majority of teams, that's how they're going to play against them. So that's where you've got to be patient and creative and thoughtful. And I think more than anything, take your chances where they come. There's been, I absolutely agree that this is Everton's best chance of winning a derby match at Anfield for a long, long time. But there have been a number of occasions in the last 10, 15, 20 years when Liverpool have gone into a derby in a poor run of form, and Everton have struggled under that kind of weight of expectation from their own supporters. Now, obviously, none of them will be in the ground either tomorrow, but it's very much there. Ancelotti will know it. Their players will know it. The general narrative surrounding the game, every other podcast, whether it's red or blue, will be making the similar point that, if Everton can't win a derby at Anfield now, when can they? So it'll be interesting to see how they cope under the burden of that pressure and whether that might play into Liverpool's hands. But, derbies are derbies. I'm not going to say the form book goes out the window, but it's, that they are a law into themselves. I think I read somewhere before, it's the most drawn fixture in Premier League history. I think we all knew about it. It has had the most red cards, but I didn't realise it's actually been the match that's seen the most draws, which shows that even if obviously in the Premier League era, how many times have Everton finished above Liverpool? Once, twice, less than a handful. But derbies are a law unto themselves, and it's it'll be the fine details in the crucial moments and who wins those vital passages of play that will determine what happens. But, I don't think you can underestimate the value of Tuesday night, not just the performance, but even the clean sheet, after having made the changes that they did. Even if that had finished 2-1, there was that little chance right at the end, it would have changed the whole dynamic, I think, and the mentality going into this weekend. For the likes of Alisson, or particularly the goalkeeper, but all the defenders, to walk away from that with a clean sheet. Hopefully, that will help them grow in confidence and help them deal with, whatever difficult moments they will face tomorrow, because they will be. That's been the problem in recent weeks. It's not like Liverpool have played terribly for 90 minutes of every match. In quite a lot of the games, they've been all right. But as soon as one thing has gone against them, that kind of mental resilience that's been such a huge part of the last couple of years hasn't really been, they've crumbled a little bit. And I understand why. There's a variety of reasons why, but we've just got to hope and pray Tuesday night was the start of getting that kind of the mentality monsters, as they've been forever labelled, back. But, it will be a very, very tough test, and there won't be much in it, I'm sure about that.
We'll go into more detail on the teams that we expect to play. But has Curtis Jones impressed you enough, Gorsty, to think that he simply has to start tomorrow? I thought he's been really, really excellent the last sort of few performances that he's put in for Liverpool.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the only way that you might not be starting is if Fabinho was fit. And then you've got a question over whether you move Henderson back into midfield. Because, he's been one of the bright spots of the last few weeks, alongside probably Salah. He's really impressed me this season, the way he's adapted to a new role in midfield. His first full season in senior football, and we know he's a showman and he likes the tricks and the flicks, and he likes to run at defenders and commit them and whatever else. But he's been asked to play a more disciplined game, more mature, just to kind of keep it simple at times, keep the midfield taken over, look for the front men when possible, and leave all the kind of fancy stuff to them, if you like. And he's just adapted to it really well, and Liverpool have got a player on the hands. He's only 20. He's going to be a Liverpool player for the next 10 years, I'm sure. And he's been an interesting subplot to what has been a bit of a wild season. So for me, he has to start. And there's some quotes from that will be online tomorrow morning with him saying he's looking to do something special again against Everton, which is nice to hear him say, because he's a confident lad, and you don't want to see that kind of be taken out of his game, even if he is asked to be a little bit more kind of conservative, shall we say.
Yeah, I'll stay with you as well, Paul, because Thiago is another midfielder that I wanted to touch upon. One of his best performances, I think, for Liverpool, it's fair to say, came at Goodison Park. It's another opportunity for him to stamp his mark on this game, because there's not been too many opportunities for him to play at his absolute peak. But maybe tomorrow could be that, with a bit of stability behind him. If Henderson and Kabak play, it does start to influence other parts of the pitch, Thiago included. Yeah,
I just think he's been so unlucky, hasn't he? I mean, he's only played once with the midfielders who he came to the club expecting to play alongside every week, hasn't he? With Henderson and Fabinho in the derby, and then we know what happened to Van Dijk, and then what's happened to Gomez, and just kind of had a knock-on effect. And even Thiago himself in that game, that Liverpool are still counting the cost of that derby, aren't they? To be fair, it should have been 3 points. Lost the main defender for the season, and Thiago only came back at the end of December when Liverpool really hit the sticky patch that they're in. So I think we'll see the best of Thiago next season when everyone's fit and he's able to kind of just play his own natural game, and he gets a full pre-season. He's not suffering with injury, or he's well over the COVID that he had back in, was it September? So I think we'll have to wait till next season to see the best of him. But certainly Tuesday night was a more encouraging performance.
Yeah, certainly been unlucky at times this season, Lynch. And another person that you could use that same word for is probably Naby Keita as well. Jurgen Klopp detailing how he'd been ill this week just as he returned to training. I mean, I feel like I ask this question every single time I host the podcast. Naby Keita is about to come back. Could he play this weekend? I mean, could he have an impact on the game? Could he have an impact for Liverpool going forward?
Well, on the game itself, you would have thought possibly maybe. I think that was the idea behind leaving him behind. When he went to play the game against Leipzig, obviously he wanted to get him fit, but then in typical Naby Keita style, then suddenly gets an illness that keeps him out of training for a couple of days. He's absolutely cursed, it seems. It's been that's just typical of his Liverpool career so far. He just, at any moment you sort of hope you can rely on him. He gets an injury or, in this case, an illness, and then I hope, with Klopp saying he trained yesterday, I would think he would be in the squad and hopefully can maybe get some minutes off the bench when Liverpool are 5-0 up or something. I think it's important to sort of reintegrate him into the team as soon as possible. Not necessarily because he hasn't had the impact that we would hope so far, but it's more about having some bodies available in midfield and a bit of an ability to rotate in there, because what's been asked of Gini Wijnaldum so far this season, for example, is he's been absolutely superhuman. What he's got through in terms of minutes so far this season, and just having the odd chance where you could maybe rest him for a game would be massive for him and the squad as a whole. So the more options, the better, really. So hopefully Keita can sort of get in the squad for tomorrow, and then if you can get some minutes off the bench, I think it's a big positive, because you just need as many players as possible during the season, because it has been utterly relentless. And though it eases slightly in the next couple of weeks, it picks back up again soon if you carry on in the Champions League, and the league schedule doesn't get any easier either. So they need him back.
Yeah, absolutely. A really talented player. Hopefully it does work out for him sooner rather than later at Liverpool. But we will conclude then with our team selections. Dan, I'll come to you first. I think given now that we know Alisson is fit, he'll be in goal. But there's a couple of questions, I think, to be answered along the back four. Are you going to stick or twist from Tuesday night?
I think I'm going to stick. I mean, as I said earlier, I would like to see Kabak and Davis tried as a pair. I think that was the whole point of, I think I'm not alone in feeling it would have been better if they'd done it at the start of January rather than the end of January. But we are where we are. We've got them in. There's still a third of the season to go. But I don't feel a Merseyside derby against an Everton who fancy their chances is the right time to throw them in. So Kabak and Henderson continue at centre back with Trent and Robbo in the full-back positions. In midfield, I absolutely agree 100% that Curtis Jones has to start. He has been one of the absolute shining lights of this very, very difficult season for Liverpool. What he did against the Blues in the FA Cup last season was one of the absolute highlights of a season full of them, as far as I was concerned. It was a privilege to be in the ground that day. And I'm sure he'll be for a local lad. He'll be. Don't think he started a derby before, has he? I'm not sure if he's even been a league derby rather. So I'm sure he'll be bursting at the seams to get involved in that. Thiago, I agree with what Lynchy said there. I think we're starting to see the signs of the player we thought we were getting. Obviously, he's had a very unfortunate start to his Liverpool career. He even put in a couple of decent tackles, I thought, on Tuesday night. There's been a lot said about his tackling, and some of it, I think it's fair to say, has left something to be desired. But particularly for a player that's played most of his career in Spain and Germany, it is going to take time to adjust to the pace of the English game. Maybe that's inevitable. So he continues for me, and then it's a question of Wijnaldum or Milner. And I'm going to plump for Gini Wijnaldum to continue. I always think Milner's a great first sub, whatever the state of the game, whether you're winning, losing, or drawing. You're always happy to introduce somebody like him.
I think James Milner might be injured, is he not, Dan?
He's still out with a hamstring injury, so he's not even. I think it's very much a team that sort of picks itself in that sense.
Of course, he went off injured early on at Leicester, didn't he, on Saturday? Yeah. Tried to block most of Saturday out of my mind in my defence. And the front three is the front three. Starting to show signs of getting back to the best. I mean, that the goal at Leicester was an absolute masterpiece, wasn't it? In all the wonderful football they've played over the last 3 or 4 years, we haven't seen too many things better than that. And it's a shame it'll be kind of forever lost to history to some degree because of what happened afterwards. But if those three can get to anything like the levels we know they're capable of, this season can still deliver an awful lot for Liverpool.
Gorst, I'll come to you next. I mean, the question for me really would be, can you afford to put Ben Davies into that defence? I think there is an argument for it when you consider how mobile the likes of Calvert-Lewin are. I think potentially someone like him, who, from what we've heard, is a more faster player across the ground. He's maybe one of those that might be able to sweep up a little bit better than Henderson or Ozan Kabak. Is there an argument at all for that, or would that almost be a little bit unfair on him to put him in a game this big?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, I think he's got a big part to play between now and the end of the season. I just think maybe it'll come next. Just think it's just a massive risk, isn't it? Throwing someone in who spent a career in on loan in Leagues 1 and 2, and then most of his career in the Championship, to step up to Liverpool and then be thrown into a Merseyside derby that's so important. So I think hang fire on Ben Davies for another week or so, and just leave Henderson in there, because Henderson hasn't really put a foot wrong at centre-back, has he? I mean, we'd all like to see him in midfield, but it's a similar situation to Fabinho, where he's dependable enough. And I think Fabinho, to be fair, has probably been Liverpool's player of the season alongside Salah in terms of overcoming that obstacle of just adjusting to being a centre-back for the season. So I think that the big thing for Liverpool was not having him available. So I think Henderson's got to go in ahead of Ben Davies, because the alternative is for Curtis Jones to play, which, at the moment he's in great form. So I'm happy enough with that midfield three. And Liverpool, for me, will be unchanged. And as we say there, that's pretty much down to the fact that they haven't really got too many other options. I think the only other potential realistic option would be Curtis Jones for Oxlade-Chamberlain, but he hasn't really done enough for me this season, so I'm sticking with Jones.
Is there any case for you, David, in terms of Oxlade-Chamberlain? Obviously, Naby Keita, we don't expect to be able to start. If he can play a part, it's going to be off the bench, I would imagine. But there's not too many options for Jurgen Klopp to make. But is there maybe an argument for Chamberlain?
I think maybe last season at some point you would have said possibly you could have got him in. I think Klopp would have liked to put him in more last season than he did. But this time around seems to have, when this drop of form has happened, sort of they seem to lose a little bit of faith in him. Doesn't seem to particularly want to start him in games recently, which is a shame really, because we know when he's at his best, he's he can be a destructive force in that midfield in terms of coming forward, bursting from deep, and get, in a way that a lot of Liverpool's midfielders don't really do. A lot of the other ones, really, he's quite different like that. But maybe that makes him suited to sort of coming off the bench if you're looking for a goal late on. Maybe that's going to be his role. Just on Davis, I actually wonder with him where you make the case where he makes a start for Liverpool until the end of the season. Now, they've had so many problems with consistency at the back because of the injuries, obviously, and you're going to name an 18th centre-back partnership, aren't you, when Fabinho comes back, and you hope that he will then be the long-term partner to Kabak until the end of the season. But if the aim is to get that partnership going, then what games you ever give Ben Davies a debut in, really? It's sort of hard to see how he makes an impact before the end of the season, unless it's off the bench, and obviously you don't tend to use defenders in that way. So I think the key will be for Klopp is to keep things as consistent as possible. Get Kabak in there for another game. Obviously, you use Henderson there for now until Fabinho is back, and just try and get some consistency going. So might be a bit of a weird one till the end of the season for Ben Davies, I think. And I think in terms of the team for this weekend, you stick with the same 11 that beat Leipzig.
Yeah, full week, of course, before the next match, Sheffield United, I think, isn't it, next weekend? So no midweek game for once for Liverpool. Just before we finish then, we'll do some match predictions. I've not predicted a Liverpool win for a few weeks, it seems, but I am going to go for them on this occasion. I'm going to go for a 2-1. Gorsty, I'll come to you first on this one. Are you optimistic?
Yeah, I mean, not as much as it normally would be at Anfield against Everton. But yeah, I think Liverpool will win. I think it might just come down to Salah 1-0, and for extra good measure, it'll be from the penalty spot.
Excellent. I'd take that, certainly. Dan, what about you? How do you see it going?
3-2 to Liverpool.
Oh, a big game. Any comebacks, or how do you see that one panning out?
Well, I'm not. I just think there'll be goals. I think where Everton having a decent season, but they've had a bit of a sticky spell. They've shown some vulnerability themselves at the back. They're going to be without Yerry Mina, who's been a big presence for them this season. We picked up an injury in midweek. Obviously, we know about Liverpool's defensive frailties, and watching them against Man City in the week, they did pretty well for now and caused City a few problems up front. So, I'd love to think Liverpool can keep a clean sheet, but I wouldn't be betting on it. But I'm going for Liverpool's desire to right, even if Jurgen Klopp won't say I will, to right the wrongs of last October at Goodison will come to the fore, and we'll edge it hopefully with a 97th minute offside handball dodgy goal that wasn't over the line.
Again, I'd certainly take it. David, how do you see it panning out?
Yeah, I think I can see Everton scoring. I think, again, a clean sheet up against Calvert-Lewin's going to be difficult. I think he's such a threat, really good player. So maybe Everton will get a goal, but I think Liverpool will be absolutely desperate to win this, fans or no fans in the ground. I think you maybe get a couple in 2-1 to Liverpool for me.
Yes, certainly wins all round then for Liverpool today. That just about brings us to the end of today's podcast. We'll be back with the next Blood Red podcast on Monday, looking back at the Merseyside derby, of course, and hopefully a Reds win. For now, though, from myself, Matt Addison, from Paul Gorst, from Dan Kay, and from David Lynch, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and until next time, it's goodbye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.